Welcome to Kapow! Comics, cartoons and collectibles are what we're about. I'm Sonya.
And I'm Al, and you know what? After the insanity that was Supernova Sydney last week, it's actually really nice to be back at our home in King's Comics.
It is. As awesome as it was being at Supernova, there's something very comforting about being back behind the counter here.
The good old counter.
Yeah.
I will say though, I could get used to doing reviews from a Lovesac. That was pretty sweet.
We have to get somebody onto that because
Yeah.
they were very comfy.
Yeah, they were.
In the meantime, however, we will be taking a look at The Cape as well as Saga.
Oh yes, and also Ray is going to be having a look at an animated series which seems to be hitting its stride, which is Bob's Burgers.
Plus our interview this week is actually with Tom Taylor. Now we did this at Supernova last week, but we ran out of time.
Yeah.
So we're putting it in this week.
There you go.
But in the meantime, let's take a look at Takio. What? Takio! Takio is the new all-ages graphic novel that's as much fun to say as it is to read. Takio! Takio!
Okay,
Takio.
now this is by Brian Michael Bendis and Michael Avon Oeming.
Takio!
You are a little too hyped up on this one. It's like you've had too much sugar or something.
I know, but it's hard not to be. I mean, this is truly an all-ages comic. It's so much fun. It's great for those of us who have been watching this duo's work in Powers.
Sure.
But it is also fantastic for younger, newer readers.
It is a lot of fun, and it's also very funny as well, which is what I like.
I never got so much more attention as I did when I was giggling to myself while I was reading this on the train.
Now, it's a fairly simple premise as far as the story goes. You've got these two sisters, Taki and Olivia, who accidentally get superpowers when their best friend's father destroys a science experiment he's been working on.
Massive anger management issues, that man.
He's going to be a good villain
will be,
ongoing, I think. So suddenly they have the ability to hurl telekinetic bolts of force and leap medium-sized buildings at a single bound. So obviously what they have to do is chuck on some costumes and go and fight crime.
Well, obviously, it's what I would do if I was in their case.
That's true.
Yeah. Now, the thing with Takio that I love the most isn't so much the story, which is great,
it's good, yeah.
but it's the relationship between the two sisters and how that develops after they get their powers. Olivia, who's the youngest one, is ridiculously adorable,
She's
and she is actually based on Bendis' own daughter, Olivia, who gets her own creator credit at the start of the book.
It's not too shabby for a 10-year-old.
For a 10-year-old, yeah.
It's good work. Now, the question, I think, is this book going to get the mass appeal that it needs to reach the broad audience that it's after?
Honestly, I think it will. I mean, the story alone has got the great, strong, witty banter that we're used to, in Bender's writings.
yeah.
And then Oeming's artwork, although not overly complex like some of his previous work, it's still got this beautiful dynamic motion. The characterization on the faces is so good. The character archetypes themselves are just, it's so beautifully done.
Yeah, and it's interesting seeing Oeming's work in this context, because obviously I'm used to seeing his work in Powers, and there is a lot of similarity between the character models. It's brighter, it's more colourful, and pretty much no one's head explodes.
Not a single head explodes indeed.
Changes a bit.
Which, I mean, really, you couldn't really have it as an all-ages comic if there were heads exploding.
No. So I think it's safe to say that this is going to find an audience, and I think it's going to appeal to that broad range that it's after, which is important, I think. It's important to have these all-ages titles, because we want stories that kids are going to be able to get into without feeling that it's being dumbed down for them,
exactly.
and that also adults will be able to get into, because let's not forget, they're the ones with the money,
very true.
and they want to be enjoying this stuff as well. So I think that's great.
Well, I know that I'm certainly going to keep reading Takio. I'm really enjoying the first one, so I can't wait to read the others.
Sure.
Now, they are coming out as graphic novels rather than single-issue serials, so we do have to kind of wait a little bit longer for the next one, but I'm okay with that because I'll just keep reading it over and over and over again. I highly recommend it to all the adults that have been following these two in Powers, but also give it to the younger ones. Let them have a go, let them have a read because it's fantastic. This is a buy, obviously, from me. It's a Takio buy. Haha. Takio.
Settle down.
Great word.
Look, I think it's great too. And I'm also recommending it across the board. I really enjoyed it. I think I'd love to pass it on to younger family members as well to check it out, have a bit of a chat with them. It's a big old buy from me as well. And yeah, honestly, if you even like superhero stories a little bit, get out there and check this one out. It's a really fun read.
Plus, Al and I picked this one hardcover up for under $15, so it's not going to hurt the old wallet either. So there is no excuse for you not to have Takio on your shelf.
None whatsoever.
Takio.
Please.
Takio.
Okay, so at Supernova last week, as you may remember, we talked to some fantastic local writers, and that was awesome.
It was.
But one that we didn't have time to show last week was an interview we did with Mr. Tom Taylor.
Yes, now Tom is a good friend of us here at Kapow, and he has had lots of success both internationally and locally, and I managed to catch up with him just quickly at Supernova. Okay, we're talking to Tom Taylor here at Sydney Supernova. So, Tom, tell us a little bit about yourself. How have you ended up where you are?
A guy called Colin Wilson basically took one of my plays with me and turned it into a comic book. And from that, I got into the greatest storytelling medium in the world of comics and ended up straight on Star Wars, basically.
You do Star Wars, you do Batman,
Yep.
these are big characters. So how do you get into the mindset of that? And also, I mean, this isn't something you've created. You have to fit in with everybody else's kind of world. So how do you do that?
Well, it's interesting. Like, with Star Wars, a lot of people, not a lot, but some people have gotten angry at me for saying, how dare you think that you can write Star Wars?
Yes.
That's my love, I grew up with it, you're wrong. But the thing is, I grew up with it too, and I love it. And same with Batman, I love these characters, and I come at it, first of all, from wanting to protect them and wanting to tell stories that I'd like to see. And because I have their voices in my head, I grew up knowing what Han Solo sounds like. And the first time I came to writing him, I knew how to write him. I was raised by TV and film, like all of us. And if Han Solo raises you, you know how to write him.
Absolutely, that's amazing. That's really cool.
Yeah. Batman, he's a little scarier. But yeah.
Can you hear Batman's voice in your head, Tom?
Not a lot. I will tell you, actually, I've got a Batman story coming out this Thursday. And I haven't told anyone this, but the person who does most of the talking in the issue is Robin. Because as far as I'm concerned, Batman shouldn't talk so much. So Robin shows up and basically does all the talking.
Fantastic.
Spoiler.
I am looking forward to reading that one, though. That'll be awesome.
Yeah, it's very cool.
How do you get into writing into that kind of world?
Going to America helps. Having meeting editors and wining and dining them and letting them wine and dine you is great. Going out and having a beer with them, heading over to San Diego, actually getting to know faces instead of just emailing them weird things. Saying, look at this thing I wrote that you'd love, and they go, oh, it's long. A beer is quicker.
A beer is quicker. Yeah. Nice. Very nice
exactly.
Indeed. But would you recommend kind of sending stuff off if anyone can't get to America and be wine and dined?
Yes, I would, but I'd recommend having a body of work first. Have something to show. Don't just send them scripts because they don't have time to read it, So have something you go, look, here I am, I've just tweeted. Check this link and you'll see this thing that I'm quite proud of that's as good as what you're doing, and check it. And they will, and if you're good, they'll know it.
That's awesome. Thank you for the advice, and thank you for chatting to us on Kapow today.
Not a problem.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I've been a fan of Joe Hill's ever since I read the first issue of Lock and Key, which incidentally I heartily recommend you check out. So I was pretty excited when I saw his name on the front cover of The Cape. Now, just quickly, nothing to do with the short-lived and ill-conceived TV show. Completely
nothing
different.
at all.
Partition there.
The interesting thing about The Cape is it's not actually written by Joe Hill.
No.
He actually wrote the short story that it's based on. The graphic is being fleshed out by Jason Chiramella.
Yes, and I was really a little bit concerned when I opened the front cover and saw that Hill was just providing the source material, but I needn't have worried.
No. I think it's very important, though, to point this out from the start, that this is a very hard read.
Yeah, it's not easy. This is quite a grim story.
It is. It kind of put me in mind of movies like The Player, where you see the story all the way through the eyes of the protagonist, who is a person you can't trust.
Right.
In the graphic, it's Eric, who is a unemployed 20-something who still lives in his mother's basement and really has no plans for the future at all.
Yeah, as it turns out, not the best person to give a magic cape that gives you superpowers.
No, really not.
No, and like pretty much every superpower story, especially origin stories, this one, there's a defining incident in Eric's youth. When he's a child, he falls from a tree, ends up in the hospital, and this causes ongoing damage to his mind.
It does. Now, apart from headaches or migraines, really, and massive attacks of anger that Eric feels, he's been left with no sense of empathy. So he kind of feels betrayed and victimised by everyone around him, even though it's quite obvious they're just trying to help him.
Yeah, but the thing is, that disconnect is really what made it very hard for me to actually see him as a villain.
Yeah.
Despite these horrific things that he does, he's damaged. He's unable to actually comprehend what the world is actually doing around him. So it seemed like I couldn't blame him for the things that he was doing.
But before we get into a massive conversation about moral culpability, let's go back to the graphic and have a look at the artwork. I think that Zach Howard has done an absolutely beautiful job marrying kind of old school techniques with these really dark, modern themes that run throughout this book. It's really quite remarkable to look at.
Yeah, especially the single and double page spreads, where there often wasn't any dialogue. Those ones really took the story a long way. I spent a lot of time on those.
They are quite phenomenal to look at. And thematically as well, Howard's made a really interesting choice of using a technique called stippling to kind of contrast between the classic comic book imagery and these really dark, naturalistic themes that runs throughout this book.
Well, I mean, this book, the whole thing is an exercise in contrasts.
It is.
And I honestly think no two people are going to react exactly the same to this book.
We certainly didn't.
No. So, I mean, that's one of the things I liked about it, though. I mean, it's very complicated. It doesn't give you any explanations. We never find out why this cape is magic.
It just is.
And there's so many people just doing things you never really know why.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love being challenged by a book. This is, look, I gotta say, this one's a definite buy from me. I got a lot out of it. I will read it again, but I've got to say, word of warning, this is not going to be a story for everyone.
Now, I am so glad that you said that because I'm actually going to give this one a borrow. Now, it's got nothing to do with the quality of the book. Like, I cannot say enough about how beautiful the imagery is, how well written the story is, but when you compare it to books like A God Somewhere, which we looked at last season.
And there is a comparison.
There is a comparison
there.
there. There is one thing that the cape is missing, and as girly as this is going to sound, I know, but it's hope. The Cape is a hopeless book. There is no light at the end of the tunnel for Eric here. You know pretty much that it's all going to be fairly grim and dark. It affected me in such a way that I can't in good conscience tell everybody to go and buy this. I think if you've got the strength, and it's definitely worthwhile looking at, but ultimately it's going to be a borrow from me.
Okay, well, I can see what you're saying. I can. I mean, although if there is anything missing, I don't think it's due to a deficiency in the story or a fault in the structure.
No.
I think this book says exactly what it means to say.
That's right.
But that's not going to be something everybody wants to hear.
No, it's grim. So, Ray, tell us a bit about Bob's Burgers.
Alright, well, I wanted to catch this series, or take a little squiz, because it's already airing Season 2, and Season 3 just got the green light. Now, I hadn't really heard much about it. There's not a lot of talk about this. It sort of slipped under the radar. I only just heard about it last month. And so, is it a sleeper hit? Is it a snoozy? I kind of want to know what you guys think about it. You can catch it Wednesday nights on Channel 11 at 10 p.m. But let's just take a step back.
Yep.
Bob's Burgers, okay. Bob's Burgers is an American animated sitcom created by Lorraine Bouchard for Fox. Now, the series centers on the Belchers. Parents Bob and Linda and their children, Tina, Jean, and Louise, all help to run a hamburger restaurant. Now, since its debut on January 9, 2011, Bob's Burgers has received mixed reviews from media critics. Metacritic scores it at 53 out of 100.
So it's pretty much it's a fairly tough one, isn't it? It's polarised audiences. It certainly did to our crew when we were discussing it earlier.
Yes.
But and personally, I don't think it's going to have mass appeal.
No, me either. Yeah. I don't know, it's hard to peg this one. It's not South Park and it's not Family Guy. It kind of lies somewhere in between.
Yeah, which some people would say is the perfect balance.
Yeah, I'd say it's a perfect recipe. It's all good in theory, but I don't know, while I'm enjoying it on one level, it's kind of, I don't know, I'm not Rolfel Mayo. Well, yeah, no, I shouldn't say that out loud, right? I should only type it.
It's a typing thing.
Oh, yeah. I'm not one of those people. I'm not one of those people. Lol. Anyway, I'm not rolling around on the floor laughing my ass off, is what I'm trying to say. But what I do enjoy is the kind of witty dialogue. It's fresh, and I don't know, the writing's quite good, which is enough to keep me chuckling along through the episodes. What's interesting is that it blends the different styles of comedy, so mainly through the younger characters, between Tina's fanaticism with Jimmy Jr. and her sardonic wit. Then we've got Jean's lowbrow toilet humour and Louise's sharp psychological terror. We get kind of different taste of humor. It's a sitcom, so there's, as I said, there's no overall story, arc. But at times some of the history is prevalent in later episodes, so that's kind of good. There's a little bit of story development there with the characters. What I like best is that it's refreshing to have the father figure as the straight man while the rest of the family play out the quirks, because we don't need another leading husband idiot like Homer or Peter Griffin. They're great in their own right, but look, Bob is kind of funny in his own subtle way. He's usually in that he's the victim of the circumstances created by the others around him.
The animation is a little crude, there's nothing flashy, and it's a little quirky.
Yeah.
They have some original songs in the series as well, which is pretty cool. That's a nice thing to add.
It is. Kudos to them
Absolutely.
for doing that.
Are they catchy? No, not really.
No, I'm not really impressed with them either. No. And the character voices, well, it took me a while for my ear to sort of adjust to the female character, Tina, being voiced by a male actor. It's actually a kind of cool concept, but it seemed foreign. I couldn't quite get a handle on it in the world that Loren had created. I don't know, what did you think?
No, well, there was one voice in particular that kind of jarred me, which was the voice of Bob.
Mm-hmm.
Voiced by H. John Benjamin, who did Sterling Archer in the series Archer, and I absolutely love this man.
Yes.
But see, the problem is Bob has the same kind of dry sarcasm that Archer does. So honestly, I'd rather watch Archer or even Venture Brothers, which does make me actually laugh, rather than continue watching Bob's Burgers, which just kind of makes me smirk a little. And does Tina remind you of anyone?
Daria, albeit a milder-mannered and less confident version, but still Daria all the same, really.
Yeah, I feel like there's too many ideas and some of them are quite archetypal and they just haven't quite gelled together.
No.
What this basically means is I'm going to give it a berry, which I don't like doing, as you all know, but there were elements of it that made me smile, but not enough to make me actually want to continue watching the show. Do I care about these characters? No, not really, and certainly not for long.
No, exactly. I think that's where you hit the nail on the head. The characters, well, look, now I can pick up season 1 of Family Guy or South Park and still have a laugh, but after watching an episode of Bob's Burgers, look, I feel like I've gotten everything I'm going to get out of it, and there's nothing really compelling me to re-watch it. I think they could have solved this by kind of having a larger story arc that sort of continued from season to season, and instead, as is, the humor's not good enough to keep me going back after the first watch. If they had have developed more of that storyline and perhaps even had the characters sort of grow within that time frame, would have been much more interesting. And then, I don't know, then the humour would have been much more interesting and would have lived better within the dramatic framework. Yeah. It would have been an awesome show, a completely different show as well. So, look, I'm not going to give this one a buy, and if I saw it sitting on Al's shelf, I'm not going to ask him to borrow it. So, I'm going to have to say berry as well. Sorry, Bob.
Show.
Not buying your burgers, Bob. Buddy. Gonna go have a pie.
Now, we know that this comic is a couple of issues in now, but so many of you guys have asked us to take a look at it. We've finally done it. So, Saga, issue number 1 by Brian K. Vaughan. Now, the copy we got a hold of is its 5th printing, so quite obviously this is being bought, but doesn't necessarily mean that it's good, does it?
No, the Twilight books and 2.5 Men have taught us that, if nothing else.
Indeed. However, in this case, it's completely justified because Saga is really rather good.
Now, Brian K. Vaughan, as a lot of people would know, it was the author of Y, The Last Man, so I wasn't really surprised that this kept up the quality. And true to form, Vaughan just hurls you headfirst into the story like the proverbial rabbit into a briar patch.
Indeed. Now, this story in question revolves around Alana and Marco, two people on opposite sides of an interplanetary war. They meet, they fall in love, they run away, they get married, and they conceive a child.
Yeah. Now, the winged people of Landfall and the horned people of Wreath, its nearest moon, have been at war pretty much as long as anyone can remember. So they obviously, both sides, see this as pretty much a betrayal of their species.
Yeah, the child herself, Hazel, which she also is the narrator of this story, is seen as an abomination by some and as a resource by others. Now, it's never actually stated what they're going to do or what they want with Hazel in issue number 1, but needless to say, every man and his dog
Or in this case, every man and his cat.
Yes, the bounty hunter has a giant cat and it's awesome.
Oh, you like the giant cat. Shocker.
The point is, everybody is after this poor little child.
Yeah, and I hope it's a chase that goes for a good long while.
Yes.
Having just seen a little bit of this universe in this first issue, we've seen a bit of Landfall, we've seen a bit of the planet Cleve, where Hazel's actually born, and a little bit of Wreath as well. You can see that Vaughn's really going for massive scope in this story.
Definitely.
And it's held up beautifully by Fiona Staples' artwork.
Oh, yes. Let us gush about the artwork for a moment, because it's fantastic. Staples is quite obviously having so much fun in this comic book.
Yeah.
She's grafted these amazing fantasy elements onto all the characters. There's fairy wings, there's bat wings, there's horns, there's one person with a unicorn horn,
just boom.
which is fantastic. And yet the characters' expressions, the way they react to each other, are all so relatable. It's, you know exactly what's going on. You never feel kind of distance from these bizarre elements that are in it.
Yeah, you do accept them, don't you?
Yeah.
And frankly, if you can turn a page and you can still accept things when you see two people with televisions for heads getting it on, then you know the artist is doing her job right.
Really?
Okay, so maybe that's not a rule that's going to apply to too many comics.
No!
The point is that this is a whole universe we're being
Yeah.
sold here, and it's being done with a heck of a lot of class. I'm
Absolutely.
quite excited about this one.
I am as well. I mean, obviously, this is a big buy from me. Brian K. Vaughan has kept up the quality that we've expected from him from his previous work, but in this such vastly different universe that we've not seen him touch before.
Sure.
Saga, to me, promises to be an absolutely sprawling, fascinating fantasy epic that I can't wait to finish reading.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it as well. I mean, there's a lot in this first issue that I don't understand.
No idea.
You know, the television-headed nobility for one thing, but you get the feeling that it is going to be explained in time.
Yes.
And thank God he didn't fall back on some painful, this is how it all began prelude. I hate it when they do that. And there's no clunky exposition.
No.
He's telling us the story by letting us live through it, and that's really the way to approach it. This is definitely a huge buy from me as well.
Yep.
I'm really looking forward to seeing how this one plays out, and it more than justifies its sales.
It certainly does. Okay, well that's all we have time for in this week of Kapow.
Yes, but don't worry, we will be back next week with a look at The Massive and Lost Dogs.
Indeed, but that's all for now, right?
Yeah, no, now we can go home.
We can?
Yeah.
Well, we kind of are home, really.
Well, look, I know I said, you know, home at King's Cone, but I'm pretty sure they won't let us actually live here.
Unless we hide really well.